Hi, my name is EToner, and I am a fourth year elementary education student at the University of Regina. This is my critical inquiry final project for my Ed Foundations class this year. So basically what we were asked to do is find a topic in education and do a research project into it and kind of critique it and criticize it and look at it from a lens of a future educator and some concerns are that you have. So I decided to do something around inclusive education. And as I was working on my project, it actually changed a lot. When I originally started, I was thinking that, oh, I'll just look at the curriculum and think of some ways that I can change the curriculum to include all learners and include all of our exceptional students. And when I started doing that, and looking for the resources to help me in this, I realized there's not that much out there. And that kind of made me change where my project was going. So what I ended up doing was looking for resources that are available to us as teachers to help us include these students in our classes and make sure that everyone is being reached. So basically a little bit about me to get started and why this was something that interested me. I just completed my internship in a grade 3 class in Davidson. I had an incredible teacher. She was the resource teacher there before she became the classroom teacher. So she had tons of tricks up her sleeve and tons of ways to make sure that you're reaching all the learners in your class. And even the students who are significantly behind, making sure that when they're in the class, they are still gaining something from your instruction. And as I was learning from her, I was realizing, wow, I have learned none of this thus far in my education. And that's scary because that's a really big part of teaching. And I believe it's a responsibility of ours to have the tools and have the knowledge to be able to reach all the learners and all the exceptional students in our classrooms. So after that experience and after realizing how little I have learned, it really became a concern for me and a concern as to why I haven't learned this. So I asked my cooperating teacher the one day if she learned all of this in university through her schooling in inclusive ed. And she actually did say that there was very little that she learned through her inclusive education program. As the resource teacher, she learned a lot through practice and through actually doing it. And didn't come out of school with these tools that she needed. So I feel like this is a big issue. So I feel like I want to provide my fellow graduates and fellow education students with some resources that they can use for including all learners in their classroom. Basically, when I started researching resources that are available to us teachers, I was quite disappointed, I guess, yeah, quite disappointed and set back by what little there was available to us. Maybe I'm just a super poor researcher and couldn't find it, but I first started by going to our curriculum website. So I went to the Saskatchewan curriculum and I looked through the quick links. There's curriculum frequently asked questions, understanding the outcomes in the renewed curriculum, cross-curricular competencies, broad areas of learning, tons and tons of quick links, a quick link to the Ministry of Education website. There is not a single link on our curriculum website to anything that's going to help us with including all of our students in our classrooms. There's not a single thing on there about inclusive education, which is concerning because when I see that, I see it as almost not having the importance that these other things may have. So I actually went on the quick link renewed curriculum and understanding our outcomes because I thought, well, maybe there'll be something on there. I went on to the understanding the outcomes quick link and looked through it, and of course I didn't find anything. It discussed the broad areas of learning, it discussed our cross-curricular competencies, the aims, the goals of the new curriculum, but again, it didn't discuss at all how in our curriculum we're meeting the needs of our exceptional learners. And that really bothered me again because it's just frustrating knowing that there's not these resources available to you and that they're really hard to come by. So that was the first thing I did. looked at that and was kind of disappointed and put off by that. And then I thought, well, maybe there'll be something on the ministry site. So I clicked on the ministry quick link, and I was brought up to the Government of Saskatchewan page. And I decided that I would search inclusive education, see if I could find any resources to help me learn how to have an inclusive classroom and how to make sure I'm reaching all of my exceptional learners with my classroom. And I found this awesome resource called Directions for Diversity. So I clicked on Directions for Diversity, and I looked through it, and it's basically a handbook on enhancing supports to children and youth with diverse needs. It's fabulous. It has tons of information in it. It's really informative. But it was created in 2000. It was written 14 years ago. So much has changed from then. Not that the information in it isn't still relevant and isn't still useful, because it is. Some of the things can be adapted to still work for today, and some of them don't even need to be adapted. But there's so many more ways that we can reach all of our students than we were able to in 2000, and how to reach our students with diverse needs. One thing that I did find that was actually quite interesting in there was basically a walkthrough step by step through the decades of how inclusive education has changed. So it has a Canadian edition as well as a Saskatchewan edition. So I looked specifically at the Saskatchewan edition, and it was quite interesting just to see the differences from then and to today. And there has been a lot of growth. It has gone from the belief that students with exceptionalities and students with disabilities needed to be in segregated classrooms in schools, institutions, that they need to be off doing their own thing, and that they can't be a part of the entire group just because they are different. That's how it was. And the changes started coming around the 60s. Since then, we have seen a move towards progressive inclusion. So basically, that means that we're bringing children who have disabilities out of these special classes and schools and into our regular school environments, and have them learning alongside their average classmates, which I think is really important. One thing that I did find interesting regarding exceptional learners and students with disabilities is that progressively every decade it mentioned that there were more and more students that were being labeled as having behavioral issues or having disabilities. And this kind of interested me and just made me wonder, is it that there's actually a higher incidence of it happening, or is it that people are becoming more aware and there's more tests available for us? So I thought that was kind of interesting, and unfortunately I wasn't able to find an answer to that. I did find it quite encouraging, I guess, to see that there has been lots of growth in the last little while, and that there still is going to be even more growth towards inclusive education and towards including all of our students with diverse needs and meeting everyone's needs in a way that isn't excluding them, and that's having them be part of the whole group, because I believe that's a super, super important part of education. So after I looked at the Directions for Diversity document and found some information in there and thought that even though it was a little outdated, it still was very useful and very informative, I continued to go on to looking for more support and looking how we can include these students in our everyday classrooms. And I found another really, really great document called the Adaptive Dimension and Core Curriculum. Again, this was off of the Government of Saskatchewan, the ministry website, and it's a quite long document that gives teachers ideas on how to use the Adaptive Dimension and Core Curriculum and how to include all of our learners in our classroom. Again, it's a little outdated. This one is even worse than the one before, as it was produced in 1992. Again, there's a lot of relevant information in it, but even the kids on the cover have these huge headphones on, and it's just so outdated, and there's so much that we're missing. So this just concerns me, because have there not been any recent documents put out by the ministry? Or am I just failing to find them? This is concerning to me because I feel like there'd be some new teachers who would find this, and unlike me, they wouldn't take the time to look through it. They'd see 1992, not a single thing in there is relevant, and they wouldn't care to look through it and see what it has to offer them. And it does have some information in it that you can still use. Like I said before, it's outdated. Some of it isn't relevant anymore, but there still are some things that are going to be helpful in there that you can find. So I guess one criticism that I would have about a lot of the stuff I found on the ministry website when I was looking up inclusive education was the fact that it is quite outdated. That does really worry me. Not that the information isn't useful anymore, but just in the sense that I think we've come a long way since then. Again, I don't know if this is an issue on my part with my researching, that I just didn't find the most recent and most relevant information on that website, or if it is the fact that there hasn't been anything produced in a while. So I was talking to one of my friends about this and how hard it is and frustrating as a young new teacher that we don't have these resources available to us. And she suggested going onto the STF website, not the ministry website. So I did that, and I actually was able to find good resources. The first thing I did click under was beginning teachers, but that didn't have anything about creating an inclusive classroom for beginning teachers. But I did go on to resources, and there are some really great resources under there that are available to you. The one that I really enjoyed was actually called So You Have a Special Student. I was quite put off by this title just because I thought that there could be some more sensitive and appropriate titles that they could have used opposed to So You Have a Special Student, because there's so many negative assumptions around that world is special. I think that there could have been a better title that they found, but besides that, I did find it to be a quite useful document. It talks about your primary supports, your secondary supports, and your tertiary supports, which I thought was really helpful because it has them all listed, has what they can do for you, and has how you can use them, which I thought was quite helpful and something that I can reference when I'm teaching if I run into problems and I need some guidance when I'm working with my exceptional learners. It also has a reflective evaluation piece, a conclusion piece, a list of references, and I just think that it's a really, really useful piece that you can use because it lays out for you what you can do and who can support you when you have these exceptional learners in your classroom. Because coming out of university, I don't feel very prepared for this. I feel like we have had a little bit of exposure to exceptional learners and how to work with them in your classroom through our education psychology class, but I don't believe that one class over 4 years is enough, especially today when there is being a higher incidence of students with disabilities or students who learn maybe a little bit of a different way. I think that we as teachers need to be better prepared to be able to work alongside these students and make sure that they're gaining what they need to be gaining from our classrooms. That leads me into a part of the curriculum that I find quite challenging when I think of trying to teach it to my exceptional students in my classroom. And that part of the curriculum is the broad areas of learning. The broad areas of learning contain 3 parts. That's the sense of self, community, and place, the lifelong learner section, and the engaged citizens section. Now, for students who are average learners and who can understand these concepts, these are incredible goals of education. There are things that you definitely want your students to be working towards. Where is our place for the exceptional learners in this part of the curriculum? I find it very challenging thinking of how I can still be meeting my students' needs while trying to build them towards this, because some of the concepts and some of the ideas within these 3 headings that are very challenging for even students of average learning ability to be able to comprehend and work towards, let alone your students who are not of average ability and who have troubles. You can't just forget these broad areas of learning. That's not what you can do, obviously, but where's the supports to tell me, okay, you have a student who has a disability and who can't understand this. This is what you should be doing to help them still work towards these broad areas of learning. Where are those supports? That is my issue, and those are my questions, because I have been researching on this for quite a long time, and I haven't been able to find tons and tons of good stuff on where I can go to get support to help these students. You can always go to the STF, and you can always go to the ministry, but what do you do when you want to be proactive opposed to reactive? I don't want to be a teacher who gets into my classroom and realizes halfway through the year, oh my goodness, this student is behind. This student isn't reaching these goals of education. I want to be the teacher who can say, okay, there's potential for this to happen. This is where I can go. This is what I need to do. I don't want to have to wait until I face this problem to know where these supports are and know how to get them. So I guess that's kind of like my issue and my question with this whole idea around support for inclusive education and support for us teachers regarding inclusive education. And lastly, the very last thing that I kind of looked into was our curriculum. I approached this just simply by going to the grade 3 curriculum and clicking on an English language arts outcome. I selected outcomes, indicators, and support materials because you would think that this is where there are those support materials that you need for your students. And that, I think, would be my number one criticism and my number one issue with our curriculum documents regarding our inclusive learners is, again, there's not a space for them in these documents. I don't think. If you go under the support section for teachers, where you would think information on where to get support for these students would be, there's nothing. It's a whole, there isn't. There's a whole bunch of zeros. And that's just really frustrating for me because I want to know if I have students with exceptionalities in my class, the materials that I could potentially access. I want to know where to go to get those. I don't want that to be just left off to the side when I have a question about it. Also, another issue that I kind of have with our curriculum is the language that is used and the higher level of thinking that is expected out of our students because, again, for the average students, it's something that they can work towards and it's something that they're able to achieve. But I feel like for our exceptional students that some of these concepts like comprehending and responding and just understanding that language can be really challenging for them. And I feel like there's not the supports out there that I need to feel confident in being able to do that and confident in being able to adapt for my students to be working towards an inclusive environment. Also, the way the outcomes are written, as I mentioned before, they require that higher level of thinking, that higher order thinking, but I feel like there's a real disconnect between the outcomes and the indicators because with the indicators, they're very, very straightforward. They don't ask for that higher level of thinking, yet you're expected to have that to meet the outcome. So I think there's kind of a disconnect there, and I think that one good thing would be with the indicators, since they don't have that higher level of thinking, it might be easier as me for a first year teacher, I guess, to be comfortable with how to maybe adapt them and work towards my exceptional learners. But I also think that there's that disconnect there, and that's an issue for me because I just feel like when there's more fluidity and more consistency throughout things, it makes it a lot easier. And also, on the note of disconnect in curriculum, another issue that I have would be the disconnect between the units and the grade levels because that can also be very challenging for our exceptional learners. It can be challenging in the sense that when a student is working in grade 3 science, your outcomes go from working on plant growth to structures and materials to magnetism and static electricity and to exploring different soils. Now, I think it's important that students learn all of this, but I also think that there needs to be a better connection and more consistency when going through our topics in our subjects because that can be really helpful and really good for our students with exceptionalities and a student who may have a learning disability just because they have that consistency and they have that repeatedness and that they might need to help them learn, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So those are kind of some of my criticisms and some of my concerns regarding our curriculum with our inclusive learners. Basically, kind of to wrap it all up and make all of this somehow make sense in what I'm trying to say, my number one concern, I guess, as a new teacher and as someone just finishing school is the lack of good resource supports that I've been able to find through the STF and through the ministry. with that being said, there are lots of good supports out there for inclusive education and ideas for incorporating it into your classroom and for meeting all your learners, but I'm just kind of disappointed with the way that it has been presented to us through the STF and through our ministry and through the curriculum, because I just feel like there really isn't a place for our exceptional learners in the curriculum or in some of the handbooks and guidelines that they have set out, and it's kind of discouraging because I am a strong believer in inclusive education, and I believe that it benefits our students incredibly, and I just feel like I'm not prepared to do that in the fall when I start teaching, or prepared to know where to turn to find these supports. And it's just kind of frustrating for me, I guess. Yeah, I guess that's kind of what I'm trying to say, and I hope that it sort of makes sense and you're able to maybe look into a few of the things that I've pointed out here. If you have any advice, I would greatly appreciate it, or if you have any really good resources that I could use, that would be fabulous as well. So thank you for listening, and I hope that it kind of makes sense, and yeah, thank you.